no matter how
Mm.
talented you were, no matter how hard you worked, it was just a non-existent, job opportunity
Mm.
after we graduated. I'm going to work in the menswear capital of the world. I'm American. So
Hi.
hi, I
Ciao.
miss you. Hi.
I miss you so much. Hi.
So for those who don't know me, I do work for Timberland based in Switzerland. And we design globally. So we design for Asia, North America, and then also
Yeah.
for Europe. So that's a lot in terms of, having to know the consumers in all these different areas. Obviously me being from the US, I know a lot about the North American consumer. Um, but this is why we travel to these places. This is why we do trend reports. This is why it's nice to have people like you in my network from Asia so that we can
Yeah.
really have a
Sure.
true insight on what's going on in every region and what different regions want in terms of the consumer and marketing to that specific consumer. Well, let's just start from my education, actually. So I
Sure.
went to Philadelphia University in Philadelphia, obviously, and I graduated in 2013 with a bachelor's in fashion design. From there, after I graduated, I was like most graduates, not really knowing what to do next. And then in 2014, I didn't have a permanent job. To be honest, during 2013, before I graduated, my grandfather fell victim to murder. And because of that, I cope with things very differently. I cope with things by being creative or, just working hard and
Yeah.
finding positive solution in things. So when my grandfather was murdered, I used that, that rest of that summer of 2013 to create my own brand. And from that, I was just really inspired going to different fashion shows in Philly, in New York, and just really gaining my network as a fresh, graduate, not knowing what the heck is
Mm.
going on in the world. I mean, I had internships, when I was in college at Calvin Klein in New York and,
Wow.
things like that. But I hadn't had a full-time job after graduating. So I was really focused on, just really going after my brand and meeting different
Yeah.
people. It was an amazing experience, really, really great. From there, 2014, I was working also at PVH in New York. And that
Yeah.
brand
Great.
specifically, I was working with Tommy Hilfiger, Calvin Klein. And
Wow.
because of the climate of the organization, it was a temporary to permanent position. So my managers were the best. They knew that the head count wasn't that high to bring me on, but they really wanted
Mm-hmm.
me. So at that point, they were just sending me around the office, like introducing me to directors in different categories. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this is Alicia. Do you have head count? Hey, hey, hey. But I feel like in life we get a no, and sometimes that no is for our benefit. And I didn't know at the time that there not being head count for me at PVH at that time
Yeah.
was going to be a blessing in disguise. Fast forward to September or the end of August of that year, I went to London and Paris, my first time going abroad. And in that time, I was already thinking, I want to move overseas. I don't want to be here anymore. I didn't know how to get over there. And the other job that I was working at the time, business development center for women entrepreneurs, one of my
Yeah.
managers there, she kind of encouraged me to, look at schools, look at jobs, however I can find a way to get overseas. So during my vacation to Paris and London, I set up an interview or like an open house with one of the schools in London because
Yeah.
that was my dream. I'm like, I'm a menswear designer. I'm going to work in the menswear capital of the world. I'm American, so that's what we think of
Yeah.
London. So I was like, this is the dream. So I actually went on that vacation with one of my best friends, Ismay. And I kind of branched off from her, and then I went to my open house and like met with them, etc. Um, but when I got back to the US, I saw an application or a scholarship competition for Domus Academy in Italy. Shout out to Domus.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so the deadline for this scholarship comes before the deadline for me applying for London College of Fashion. So I
Mm.
applied to that first at Domus Academy. And before I can even apply to the school in London, it was crazy. Like I found out that I won, and not only did I won first place. And I'm like, what the heck? Like a girl from West Philly, like, competing with people who are global, people from Asia, people from
Yeah.
Europe. And this is like, my only first time being abroad was going on that trip to Paris and London. So I hadn't had like a wide spectrum of the
Yeah.
world at that age. I think I was 23, I want to say. Yeah, I was 23. So I was just overjoyed the fact that I won first place. I remember like crying to my boss, like I didn't think I was good enough. So that was October. I found out that I won that scholarship. And at that point, I had 3 months to move out of the US. And I was like, yes. And it was so funny because I didn't believe it. You know, I was speaking to like the coordinator at the school. And I was like, you mean to tell me I can move in 3 months? Like, I don't have to wait to the next year? Because most of the grad schools were like, you know, you need to wait to the following semester to start. So I was going through stuff personally. And then like career-wise, I felt stagnant in New York and Philly. And I was like, I'm moving in 3 months. Like, and that's what happened. And then January 2015, I moved. I met you, my favorite person. And that was just an amazing experience for me because I was the only American in that program. There was about 10 or 11 of us. And everybody represented so many different backgrounds from different parts of Asia to Russia. Shout out to Kate. Shout out to Pri, to Canada, Azar. Like, it was so many different nationalities. And in that, you know, you understand in that 1 year how close we became. Because for all of us, we were all in a position where we dropped our lives and moved over to another country with no family, no friends. And we were all each other had, you know, from cooking with each other, you know, to just really building a nice, diverse culture community, which to this day, 6 years later, means so much to me. And the fact that, you know, you're still one of my greatest friends. And, you know, I traveled with you to see your hometown in Thailand. Like, I
came to Thailand.
Working in this industry, people think that, you know, to be a fashion designer, you need to be like, you know, Devil Wears Prada, be like this jerk to people. And like, but there's so much coziness and, you know, human to human connections that you get in the design process. And I think that's something really important to highlight within the industry itself. You don't have to come out of your character and be like this spiteful, statistical person to get a hit. You know, it's strength in numbers. And, you know, I really truly believe in collaboration and keeping connections and networking. And I think that's how you
supporting
can
each
grow
other.
and move forward.
I think it's really important to be like supporting each other because like nowadays people really like getting a lot of harder and harder about like trying to find a job in Thailand or like wherever they want to be. So the best part of like being in Milan is about the connection, you know, like 9 countries. Do you remember that? So we met a lot of friends and then we make like, super international. And then we still keep in touch till now today. Yeah, I would love to talk to you about your previous job because like after you graduated from the Moose Academy, you went back to USA for work.
Woo! Where do I start? So, all right. So I moved to Italy in 2015. That program was only supposed to be a year. So we graduated in 2015. And like you said, so my class, we all wanted to stay in Milan. Like, the reality of the situation was the fact that in 2015, the fashion industry, the job community was just non-existent. No matter how talented you were, no matter how hard you worked, you know, it was just a non-existent, you know, job opportunity after we graduated. But we found a way to hustle and like stay longer. After I graduated December 2015, I joined a project with Stone Island and B&W Group. And I stayed on, and that's how I was able to stay in Italy a bit longer. I was working on a project with them where I made outerwear, which was a very interesting collaboration because we were catering to that automobile world and then also merging it with design, which was a great experience with Stone Island. They welcomed me hands in. And then, you know, that wasn't a permanent job. Obviously, it was like a freelance position. And, you know, as I was speaking with the owner of, the founder of Stone Island, he gave me advice. He's like, you know, Alicia, you're very talented. Unfortunately, due to the market here in Italy, there's nothing really substantial that we can offer you. At that time, I applied for a job in the US at Reebok. And when I applied for that, I kind of was like, I don't know if I want to go back to America right now, because at that time, for my fellow Americans in the chat, at that time, America, it was just going crazy, like in terms of police brutality. It was also an election year for Trump. It was just a lot going on.
Trump,
and I was really sad. I had so many emotions. I was really happy about, oh my God, I got a job at Reebok. What? But then at the same time, I was so sad at the thought of moving back to the US in the climate that it was in. But, you know, I put my big girl pants on. I was like, my sadness right now sounds like privilege. How am I crying about going to an amazing opportunity? So I moved to the US in August, and I started my job in a new city. I moved to Boston. Never been to Boston. It was my first time there. And I moved to Boston like 3 days after moving from Italy. And I started my job at I was specifically in SLD. So SLD is Sports Licensing Division.
Yeah.
So I was working on sport product, which was amazing because I love sports. I love basketball. I grew up as a
Yeah.
cheerleader. It's just something that was just innate in me. I love being surrounded, and I love, you know, I just love that kind of vibe of a company. So I enjoyed myself, and I was also welcomed with, you know, my manager was amazing. My manager and the team that I was working with just had my back. So working there was great because, you know, we had all the perks of going to different, you know, basketball games, baseball games, sitting in the box office. And then actually I learned how to play hockey, which was so funny because I love ice skating. I love skating, like rollerblading.
Yeah.
But because I was designing for NHL, which is like the National Hockey League in America, because I was designing for that professional team, we as designers needed to relate to them. So we needed to learn how to play hockey. We needed to like understand the movement so we can understand what cuts we needed to put in, etc. So that was a fun time. Like shout out to Michael, my manager, and Eric. They were amazing. Like I had a blast with them. It was such a great time. But you know, that year 2016, you know, we found out that, you know, a lot of companies, a lot of global companies and corporate, they're just, it's business, you know. If someone buys out another company, then, you know, they're going to decide to take those designers or not. So at that time, I was working for Adidas, but at the Reebok headquarters in Boston. Adidas headquarters is in Portland. So because of that, we had a new president, and that president came in and was like, okay, we're going to separate this. Reebok is moving to Seaport, and Seaport is a district in Boston, which is like downtown, to really cater to the creative community. And they were like, the SLD, the Sports Licensing Division, you guys got to move over to Portland. But it wasn't as black and white as that. It wasn't like, oh, you guys all have a job and you guys are all moving. But I think they realized like later down the line that some people in my team, like my manager, had a great connection with the NHL. Like that's a professional league, and he had a great connection with them. So you can't just fire these people and bring in new people and expect to have that same cozy relationship. As I mentioned before, the industry is also about relationships that you have with people. So if a professional league like NHL is having already a good time and a good relationship working with my design manager, you can't just up and be like, oh, we're replacing you. So at that time, you know, it felt like everybody was losing their jobs. So in that moment, my managers really rallied behind me when I found out. So with Timberland, I was in connection with a guy who worked at Timberland when I was living in Italy. I did a project for Timberland 5 years ago. Yeah, you remember that project, right?
So long.
Yeah, that was like 5 years ago.
It was fun.
Which is so crazy because I did that project for Timberland. You know, we had to make the video and do all this stuff, which was so fun. So I stayed in contact with him throughout my journey. Like when I was working for Stone Island, he would send me like articles. Like he just became like a mentor kind of. He would send me articles about design and just will be like, Alicia, you should do this. Then like, it's so weird how timing works, because when we found out that we were all basically losing our jobs, he reached out to me and was like, Alicia, if you want to move back overseas, we're going to be posting jobs soon. But he introduced the conversation like,